My first event was a wedding. It wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. To this day, probably one of the most stressful days, of my life.
How did the DJ career start?
So I've been doing this about 18 years now, but I'm going to say as a legitimate business, about 10. Before I just kind of, dabbling here and there, but about 10 years I've been doing kind of what you see on the day to day online and stuff like that. So, um, back in, God, it's probably almost 15, 20 years ago, my brother, who's a DJ,
Okay. What's
one
his DJ
morning,
name by the name?
so it was just DJ Bry. His
Okay.
name is Brian. He has a family now. He's kind of moved on to other things. So little sister has kind of fallen into the footsteps. But like I said, this is
Nice.
a wild story. So I actually never wanted to be a DJ, believe it or not. It was
Hmm.
never written in the cards. It's never something I aspired to be. But obviously being around my brother who did it, it was kind of his first job, so to speak. He worked for a multi-op, so he just would pick up events here and there. And of course, me being around him, little sister wanting to, dig in his fire CD collection,
Okay.
right? And just play with things. I kind of picked up little things here and there, but it was never the vision of mine. So anyway, one morning we hear a really loud crash in our upstairs of our house, and my family and I run upstairs, and we find my brother unconscious on the floor, and he had fallen into his closet doors, which is what the loud crash we heard was. Um, we obviously had no idea what was going on. So just to kind of quell everybody's anxiety, he lived. We found out he was an undiagnosed type 1 diabetic.
Wow.
But we never suspected it because he was like 20, 22 years old at the time, so it's just kind of weird. So any which way, we obviously call for ambulatory services. He's whisked off to the ICU because at the time we had no idea if he was dead or alive. Like we didn't realize it was a diabetic coma. Um, but he was actually getting ready for a wedding that day. Now, I was only, I don't know, 15 or 16 at the time. I even had my learner's permit. Like I wasn't even legally able to drive,
Okay.
at the time. And we're also talking about a time where, again, CD collections, these big bulky case logic cases, and you had, the catalog with the binder to flip through to tell you what
Yep.
was on what CD. It wasn't like, Beat
Absolutely.
Source, so you just type it in and boom, there you got it. Um, and he also had a really heavy passive Bose system, so things
Yeah.
weren't even powered. So the amps like weighed more than I did, at the time. It wasn't as easy as we got it today.
Now, yeah.
So any which way, I kind of looked at my dad and I said, Dad, he's supposed to be at a wedding. These people have no idea what's going on. And this is actually during a time where even like text messaging was a little cumbersome. Like we had texting then, but it was like, I don't know, 10 cents a text, and it wasn't what we know now. So it
Yeah.
wasn't really easy to get a hold of people. I had MapQuest directions. Like it was
Yeah, I
before,
remember.
Google Maps and stuff. Dude, I'm telling you, we're old school. We're taking it back here.
Absolutely.
So I said to my dad, I was like, look, let's finish packing the car. Um, let's go to these people's houses and at least tell them what's going on, right? They at least deserve to know what happened to my brother, even just out of respect for, his name, that he wouldn't just take their money and flake out. Like I at least understood the gravity of that. So we took the MapQuest directions. My dad helped me finish packing up the car. We drive to the spot, and we see everybody there, and they're like, who is this little girl and who is this like weird old man? like who are
It's
these
not our
people?
DJ. It's not who we
this is
pay.
this this is not our DJ, dude. Where's my car? Like they had no idea what was going on. So my father and I explained to them, what had happened, and that we really didn't have a lot of information. For all we know, he could be dead right now, but we just wanted to come and do the right thing to let them know, what was up. And I told him, I was like, listen, I'm not a DJ, but I definitely know enough to like hit play. I know what a volume fader is. I have tinkered around his CD collection. Like I know how to find what songs you may want. So I'd be more than willing to do what I can for you today. I'm assuming I would be better than nothing. It's either that or put on a radio, and I don't know, a popular radio station on here, Star 99.9, like put on FM radio or have nothing. So they go, yeah, I mean, if there's no other choice, whatever you can do, please do it. So my dad and I showed up really extra early again because we had no idea how to hook any of this crap up. And it pretty much was trial and error. It was like, okay, if this is a round hole and we see a round thing, you stick it in, and do you have sound? If you don't, put it in the next hole. And if you don't, and we just kept sticking things in holes and connectors and plugging it to power, until stuff actually worked. And we figured it out. So my first event was a wedding after not being a DJ, literally thrown to the fire just to just do the right thing for these people and for, my brother's, reputation. It wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. To this day, probably one of the most stressful days of my life. Like now at that time, at the age, I thought of myself as a kid, but I was a younger, adult. Like I understood what needed to be done. So I just did what I could do, and that was it, man. So that was like the roots of DJ Rachel, but
Wow.
it wasn't meant to be. Like I didn't want to be a DJ, but here we are, like almost 20 years later, doing some pretty awesome things. So
if you're enjoying the content you're watching right now, and you want to learn how to level up at all your events and create vibes, well, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel right now. 5165 Fort Apache Road, Unit 175, Las Vegas, Nevada. Tell me about this address.
Fort Apache. I don't know nothing about that. Oh, Blend. Blend DJ. I was like, hold on a minute.
Oh, yeah, I hit you with the address. We couldn't just straight up ask that, but yeah.
There you go. I hated the drive. I live in Henderson, so it was a long drive, but well worth it. So
how long was the drive from
like 30 minutes, something like that. Long drive. That's why I was like, Fort Apache. I never go over there. What are you talking about? Yeah, the big blessing in my life, Blend DJ Institute. That's where I learned pretty much the whole mechanical end of DJing.
Honestly, for me, it started as I was like kind of like a helper. I would help this who was like a Latin DJ at the time, and he used to carry a lot of speakers back in the day, back in the early 2000s. I want to say 2004, 2003, and he used to carry speakers with amplifiers and stuff like that. So I would just go help him out, unload and load, and then eventually help him out, hook everything up. It wasn't for a lot of money either. So I think it was like 20-40 bucks he should give me a night, and I would just go hook up, his system, whatever. But eventually, it got to a point where like he was just hanging out at the bar, chilling, hanging out while I was playing the music, the CDs and stuff like that. And then eventually, I got tired of it. I was like, I could probably do this on my own. So little by little, I started buying like used gear. I started off with CD players, the tabletops. And then I had like a little small, I want to say it was a Gemini mixer, like a 2-channel Gemini mixer. And then pretty much start off just like that. And the reason I got into it is just because of loving music. It really wasn't for the money. That just came on later on as I got older and I started doing more events. And then it kind of grew up to where I am now.
I was attuned to music at a really, really early age, very early age. So, being in a car seat, or back in the days was a booster seat, I remember the tunes that was coming out of those speakers in the back seat.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I remember those tunes, and that's an era for me. And in the 80s, I was in high school and stuff like that. The golden age of hip hop and everything, and how involved I was in hip hop, and I was making records, doing beatboxing, like I did a bunch of stuff, outside. And I didn't really start DJing until like 86, because I was always a dancer. That was my main thing. I used to dance, and then I used to do some graffiti, right? So in Plainfield, I used to be called Tic Tac, because I would do the ticking move. You know what I mean? So
You still be doing it? You still got the dance moves?
I mean, it's like riding a bike. You know what I mean?
You still got it.
But
got it.
it's like, but I traded off that knowledge, and I had a boy, my man 12 Gauge, who at the time was DJ Fresh. He taught me how to DJ, and I taught him how to pop. You know what I mean? Pop and lock and stuff like that.
Straight
So
up
that's when I started DJing, and I found out that, my whole thing with hip hop was all about how to get women. It was a women thing. Okay. It's like I started popping and learning how to dance because there was this talent show and these dudes was on stage popping and locking. And I'm seeing all these girls screaming. I'm like, that's it.
That's the key.
That's it. Okay. So I started doing that. So then when I'm DJing, you know what I mean? I'm seeing all these butts wiggling. That's that.
That's
and then and then the music is loud. They got to get all up in your ear. Can I get a request song? Yeah, girl. You know what I mean? And I was, in Jersey, it was very heavy house. You know what I mean? Even back in the 80s, it was very heavy house music. So I learned how to DJ, hip hop, scratching and stuff like that. But then I settled into the whole house scene because that's what the women liked. And how, I was doing the parties in the basement, and I was playing a bunch of house music, and it was really, really working for me.
What's going on, DJ family? DJ Reese here. Every Monday at 9 a.m., I'm dropping a new podcast episode where I'm highlighting some of the dopest DJs out there that are creating vibes at all the venues that they're DJing at. If you want to hear these stories, level up in your DJing. If you're a new beginner DJ, you need new tips. You want to hear the inspiration from the DJs who started out new, that are taking their DJing game to the next level. Well, you got to check out recreatethevibes.com. Every Monday, 9 a.m. New stories, new episodes from the dopest DJs out there killing it in the game right now. Hosted by DJ Reese. Again, check out recreatethevibes.com.